Welcome. In this particular demo, we're going to have a look at creating our first Android app. It's going to be a very simple Hello World one, but that said, we're still going to spend a reasonable amount of time on it. Android's big. There's a lot of concepts and different aspects that are associated with it. So whilst the amount of functionality that it will do will be very limited, you may want to go through this a couple of times just to make sure that you're okay and you're happy with the concepts or some of the key concepts that underpin programming within Android. So we have Eclipse opened up. We've also got an emulator up and running so we can deploy things too. So the first thing we want to do is to create a new application. So go to File, New Android Application Project. And this will bring up a few dialogues where we get to specify the type of app that we want to develop. Got to give it a name first of all, so my first game. Application name, project name, normally keep them the same. Package name is important. This is the thing that uniquely identifies your package. And any of the source code that we create, it will automatically belong to the package that we specify here. So for us, AC or UK.AC, Queen's University Belfast, EECS, my first game. So there you go, that's our package name. The next three enable us to determine, well, what type of device are we targeting, and what's the minimum version that we can actually run on successfully. So normally you sort of target the latest and greatest. We're just going to go for KitKat. The minimum is the one you think, okay, well, anything beyond this, I can run it. I've got the right feature set. So normally you would test that. Here we're just going to go for KitKat just by way of simplicity, and we'll compile it with KitKat as well. So we're not making life complicated for ourselves. Theme is just broadly how the thing will look like overall. On to next. Yes, we might as well create a custom launcher, and we do want to create an activity. I'll talk about those in a second, and create it in our workspace. This is what our launcher will look like. Fair enough, we just get different versions of our images. And we said we wanted to create an activity. Now, activities are important. When we think about our app, an app can be broken up into one or more activities. So an activity is something that you do within it. It should be a meaty activity. In turn, an activity can potentially be broken up into one or more fragments. So they're a bit of that activity. So an activity might be a payment option. So if I had a way of, for example, collecting credit card information, I might have an activity capable of doing that. And within the activity, I might have several different screens or different stages to it, and I could define a fragment for each of these different stages. But for this particular first demo, we're just going to create a blank activity. In the next one, we'll have a look at fragments, and we'll see how they complicate. That's maybe the wrong word, but how they sort of enrich activities and give us a lot more flexibility. So next. Happy with the default name for the activity. You can call it something more meaningful if you want to, and we do finish. Now, at this point, we have our Android project created, and you can see actually there's a bunch of different directories and things and different aspects that have come along with creating that particular Android application. So let's run it first of all. A couple of ways we could run it. We could right click and go down to run. We could run it from the file menu here, which we will do. And I'll pull up then the emulator. So it did say down here sort of running the thing, and depending upon the size of the file, has to push that across to the device. So it might take a little bit of time. Small one here is quite quick. And we can see here that we have my first game, Hello World, has appeared. And that's what we get out of the box. So we want to have a little look about how it is the app that we have created here, this default project, brings together different aspects to enable Hello World to actually be displayed as our app. And it is maybe more complicated than you would like it to be, but there are good reasons why that's the case. But we'll have a look at those. So first thing we want to do is let's have a look at the directories that have been created within our particular project. So we have the one that we're building it with, Android, KitKat. Any private libraries, if you sort of have those defined. Our source directory, and this is one that's important for us. So there you can see we have our package name, and within this we have one piece of code. This is our source file here. So any code that we add in, it will be added into the source directory of this package. We can define subpackages of that. We have a gem directory, and this stands for generated Java files. And again, it maintains the same package name. So within this, we have 2 auto-generated files, and we'll have a little look at those later on. We don't modify those files, not directly. We may be introducing things in here, we could be introducing things down there, which change how these auto-generated files are built. But they're ones that are created on our behalf. And they really are the bridge between resources, things like menus and layouts with the Java code. It gives us our way of linking the two of them together. Assets, we will be using assets. Assets is where we will be adding in our graphics, our sound, and all the other things that we will need to display or to play within our particular game. Bin is the binary directory, so whenever we build our project, it gets to be, all of the different bits get to be stored within the bin directory. And my first game is the application, the APK file, and this is the one that gets to be then deployed up and run on the tablet device itself. I've got a manifest too for pushing it up. Libs, if you have any libs, are defined within there, and res for resources. We actually have quite a few different folders within the resources, and these are important. So drawable, we've got drawable low DPI, medium DPI, high DPI, extra high, and extra high DPI. So what are these? So at the minute within them, for example, open these two, we've only got the launcher, and if I were to open that, you'll see it's the program launcher that we have, our little Android figure. So that was the medium DPI, and there is the extra high DPI. Put them side by side, you can see it's the same thing, just at a different resolution. And this is one of the nice things about how they've structured this, but it's also one of the complexities of writing an Android app, that it deploys to a very wide range of devices, some with modest screen densities, some with extra high screen densities. So the way this is set up is that when we're providing things like images or icons, we provide it at different resolutions. And for the device, it will say, okay, well, what screen density do I have on my device? Let me pick, in this case, an icon that is right for that screen resolution. So it's one way of handling all of the different resolutions across devices. This said, as I've already mentioned, we'll be storing our graphics within the asset folder, so we're going to avoid that complexity. We're going to build our game really for a sort of a target resolution, which will be upscaled or downscaled as needed. We have a layout folder within resources, which is important, and this shows us the different layouts that we can have within the game, or different screens, and we'll look at that briefly. We also then have menus. We're not making use of menus in this, and values are important. So there you have dimensions, styles, and strings, which we will use. So strings is a bunch of XML. Here we're just defining 3 strings and giving them values. Depending on the version of Android that you are supporting, you can have different string values. But again, we're only going to support the more recent versions, so we don't need to worry about those aspects at the end. So that's quite a lot of information. So make sure you're happy with the different folders that are available and roughly the bits that go within it. Let's have a look at the layout then, because this is quite important for what was displayed. I can maximize this, Control M, we'll bring it up. It is the layout. This is what was displayed, and now this bit here is emulated. The first game in the hello world is what has been rendered, and what is behind this is a chunk of XML. So if we want to display a particular UI, we in Android can describe it using a chunk of XML. It's a massive schema. There's a huge amount to this in terms of the different components and attributes and elements you can have. Thankfully, because we're developing a game, we only need to concern ourselves with a very small subset of that, and that's what we will be having a look at. But what do we have within this? We have a relative layout, so we can set out a number of different elements. Here we only have one text view relative to one another. For the text view, you can see here we have a couple of different attributes. We've got the width and the height, and we're setting that to be wrap content. So in other words, it'll be automatically resized to fit whatever text we have stored within it. Over here, the text that we have is a string resource. So the ampersand string says that this is a resource, a string resource called hello world. And if we wanted to, we could go into our resources, down to our strings. And if we open that up, we will see there that we actually do have defined a hello world resource called hello world. And that's where it pulls it from. Now, I could go in here and change this to how are you, save it, and then if we were to run this, back to our emulator, it'll push up as how are you. So you can, or we could put it in directly. It's not a good idea to do that. If I wanted to change how are you, I really should be defining it within this particular one. Why would I do that? Why do I have that sort of layer of indirection? Again, this comes into some of the complexities about developing apps. Apps you can sell into a worldwide market. So you can sell across as many different regions, many different countries as you want. So localization is quite important, where you have your app capable of supporting several different languages. It's not an issue for us in terms of our games, but if you actually are serious in developing an app, you do want to localize it depending upon the region. This separation, where we take a layout, we describe how we want it, but the content of that layout in terms of language-specific elements we redirect elsewhere, is great. It means that we can define our interface and have different collections of strings which are localized for different regions and automatically pull those in. So again, it's a nice way of handling one of the challenges of developing apps that deal with a wide range of screen resolutions that are targeting multiple different regions, different languages. So this is some of the complexities that are intrinsically inherent. Admittedly, we're doing a game, we're just going to go for the simple version of it, so we're not going to be that bothered about it, but it's important to understand they're there. There are things that you really ought to be concerned with. Okay, let's go back then. So have a look at the graphical layout. It's a nice one. We've got our how are you appearing then. So again, the way this will do it, actually we'll do it live based on the data. This is nice. We actually can drag things around. So I could go into the XML and I could specify the XML for how I wanted the line at the bottom and give it margins left and right to get a particular precise layout, or I could just do a drag and drop. I could right click on this, I could edit the text size. So for example, I could say it is, now normally for text size is how many point size. I say I want a font size of 50. A little bit more complex here because there are different units. If I'm specifying how big I want something, so when I say pixels, DP stands for density independent pixels, which means that I could say an image is 50 dp high, and it will scale depending upon the device that I'm using. So I could request that this font is 50 pixels high in terms of its rendering. Normally though, for pixels it's SP, which is scale independent pixels. So it will say, yes, you have 50 pixels high, but it takes into account the user's preference. If they like their text big or small, it'll be scaled according to their preference too. Anyway, there you go. We've now got a larger chunk of text. You'll notice there's pallets over here, so we could take a spinner, add that on. We could add something for rating how good our page is. We can add in whatever elements we want to add in. And if we were to save that and then run it again, open up our emulator. So it's been deployed out, and you can see here we have the different components or spinners kicking around. We could obviously rate as a 5-star page. So I mean, it is fairly simple, straightforward to knock up a user interface from this. Now, at this point, all we've done over here, this is generating a lot of XML. So we see we've got our text view, our progress bar, our ratings bar, and the switch. What about the coding aspect? Because ultimately, this is what we want to add in. We want to have some code behind this so that we can control what happens. In our case, we can bring our game to life. So if we have a look at our main Java file, this is actually very straightforward. In fact, at the minute, it's overly complex. So we've got 3 methods. Our main activity is a type of activity. We've got an OnCreate method, an OnCreate options menu, and an OnOptions item selected. These 2 are to do with the menu bar, which we're not using. So we can delete them. Not going to make a difference. Oh, now, I might as well put in here, we've got a little Lint thing appearing at this point. Now, Lint is the one that sort of suggests recommendations about how you can improve your program. So it's saying that we've got a view menu and view menu bar. They're never used. And if you look within this, we're importing a few things here which we're not using within this piece of code. So whenever we actually did have some methods that manipulated the menu, we did use those, but we're not doing it now. Android's quite nice. I can go into source, I can say organize my imports, and it will scan through the file looking for anything that I do use. This could be new things about it in, things I've taken out, and it will then rejig the imports so that it matches what I'm using within it. So it's a nice little feature of it. Anyway, so we've got our main activity, and within this here we have one method that is, okay, taken in a save. I'll talk about this in a second, and it's setting the content view equal to be the description of the interface that we set out. Now we want to have a look at this in a second, but I want to do a little aside first of all, and I want to bring up this. OnCreate. In our code, if we were to look at the methods that begin with on, we would have OnCreate, like we have different types of OnCreate view. We have OnDestroy, we have OnRestart, OnStart, other ones OnStart, OnStop, OnResume. So there's lots of different on methods, and these are important ones because it ties into the life cycle of an app running under Android. And it's important to get this because all of our apps will be subject to this particular life cycle. So you can see it over here. We've got an activity launch. So whenever we launch an activity on our tablet or our phone, our app goes through several different stages. It gets to be created first of all. And whenever it is created, whenever our activity is created, to be precise here, so we can have several different activities, and activities can be brought into life at different points in time. But this is our main activity. Whenever it is created, this OnCreate method gets to be called. And we put in there whatever code enables us to create that activity. In this case, all we are doing is saying how we want that activity to look like. Now, that's not the end of the story, because after activity is created, it is then started. And it is started whenever it becomes visible to the user. So OnCreate says, okay, well, what do you want, how do you want it to look like? That's an important aspect of OnCreate. Whenever something then is pushed up onto the screen and is visible to the user, the OnStart method gets to be called. So I could overload it here. I could say what I want to have happen when it's visible to the user. And finally, the OnResume method gets to be called whenever the user can interact with the application. And at that point, it's running, and we have a fully running activity. Now, let's say that some other activity comes into the foreground. So we've got something else which has popped up for the user. Our application will be paused. So we will have an onPause method that we can override, and we can put in there, well, what do we want to have happen whenever we've lost control? Maybe we want to stop something or we want to save something. If our activity becomes non-visible, so the users minimize the thing or put some other activity on top of it, then the onStop method gets to be called. And again, here we can we can save whatever we want to do. We can stop streaming or playing music or whatever is appropriate to disappearing from the screen. Now, if you are in the stopped or if you're in the pause location, you actually still can transition back to the start and the resume, or from pause to resume, so that you can iterate around these different things. And if I'm stopped and the user restarts me, go back into the start to the resume and then running the activity. Ultimately, at some point, we will destroy our particular app. Now, that could be destroyed by the user, it could be destroyed by the actual Android operating system to free up some memory. But the non-destroy method will get to be called. So it's important to understand that this is the life cycle of our program, and we will, and for a game as well, is going to hold to this. So we will be creating some of these different methods when things are started and stopped or become visible or invisible. We will want to take certain activities within the game by way of pausing the game or stopping the music, just to make sure that we're offering a good experience to the user. Whenever it's destroyed, we'll want to make sure that we're freeing up whatever things need to be freed up. But we'll see that as we go through and look at different examples. Okay, so hopefully happy enough with that one. Now, each activity, it has a content view, so the thing that is visible for that particular activity. And when we create it, quite reasonably, we are saying, let us set the content view. Now, if we didn't have that, if we took that out, and we saved this, and I ran my particular app, it's run. We've got our activity displayed, but we're getting the content view, which is default. There's nothing there. So it is important for me, when I run it, to say what it is I want displayed within this. So I'm as part of my code, determining what exactly is displayed. And this bit here is interesting, and it's going to be something we'll be using quite a lot. So r.layout.ActivityMean. R is the R file over here. It is the resource file. And if I have a look at the resources, it's a class, final class, can't modify it, a bunch of static values within it. So that's all that we have. So we're going to a class, we're accessing some static variables. Here we're accessing a static variable in layout called ActivityMean, and it's an integer. And true enough, if I go into layout, I go down here, we see some IDs. I will see here I've got a layout class within my R Java file, and within that I have a static variable called ActivityMean, and thereafter we have some meaningless numbers. So you see lots of meaningless numbers after these. So what is this doing? So when I run it, I am basically saying set the content view to whatever meaningless number ActivityMean refers to. And this is again an important aspect where down here we have our ActivityMean, and this is the thing that I want to be able to invoke within the code. And anytime I create a new activity, my auto-generated files are updated with a number that is unique, a number that uniquely identifies that activity. And I can use those numbers to refer to those chunks of XML over here. So give me an example. If I were to create a new, it's off the capture screen, new Android XML. So I want to create a new piece of XML. There's different XML resources I can create. Here I'm creating the layout one. I'll call it my second screen, and we'll give it a frame layout. Why not? And it will do. So down here we have my second screen has been created within my layout folder. And okay, it's complaining about some of the aspects about the default one that I selected. But the nice thing about this one here is that if I were to go into my resource file, oh, okay, sorry, beg pardon. Let me actually create this correctly, because it's not been able to build this one, so it's not going to be able to be displayed. So let me create a meaningful Android XML, my second screen. Not frame layout, let me use a linear layout for that particular one. And I don't need to do that particular one. Finish. So my second screen. We're loading in. We've now got the profile for it, so we've actually been able to build that. Let me save that then. Now, I have a second screen. It's been compiled okay. It's not having an issue with that one. If I again go into my R file, we will see down here that I have my ActivityMean, but I now also have my second screen. So it is being accessed as well. I could add in date and time. Why not? Let's add in the date and time to that particular one and save that. And if I then went into my main activity and set the content view, beg pardon, to lay out my second screen. So it's now available. I save that, and if we were to run this, it's now picked up, and we now have our particular calendar view within that. So very easy to do this, but again, as an important aspect of understanding that the XML files that we are creating here, the way that we have of linking it into the code is through these auto-generated files. And you can also see here that all of the strings, so for example the app name, the hello world one, they too have numerical values. And this actually is a good thing, because if we're using ints to refer to the resources, then that's quite a compact, quite a fast, quite efficient way of doing it. But inside our code, we will be using the access and referring to our resources through the auto-generated R or resource file. Now, that's all we want to cover within this particular talk. I think it's gone on long enough. Certainly make sure that you're content enough with the folders that you have. You're okay in terms of the fact that we're dealing with XML by way of doing the layout, and you've got your graphical editor to help you. That you're happy with the different states that we have in terms of creating and displaying and resuming and destroying and all of those types of ones, and that we have that linkage between our XML through the auto-generated resource file into the code. They're all the key things we want to take away from this that we will be relying upon and using by way of developing our game. The next talk after this, we will have a look at fragments and how they sit alongside activities.